Today on the Dairyland Initiative podcast, it's all about Lunge and Bob.
Hi, I'm Courtney Hallbach.
And I'm Nigel Cook,
And this is the Dairyland Initiative podcast,
where we get to discuss issues related to the housing and management of dairy cattle.
Let's dive in. Well, Dr. Cook, I think it's time to talk about the mechanics of lying and rising, Lunge and Bob.
What are we talking about? People are saying Lunge and Bob. This begins a sequence of podcasts, Courtney,
Yes.
on stall design. So we're going to really drill down on freestall design in these episodes. And we've already covered the surface.
Yep.
You're not going to let me go back to that?
Nope, Mr. Sandman, we got to now focus on what you put around in the stall.
Exactly. We're going to talk about all the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
Starting with Lunge and Bob.
Starting with, it's pretty important.
It is, because we're trying to maximize the natural rising and lying movements of the dairy cow.
This all dates back to joining the group.
You're now dating yourself.
Yep.
That was in the 90s.
And Ken Nordland was really struggling to find materials to teach students how to assess these new freestall barns that were appearing all over the state. So we sat down and we went through a process. We said, well, let's imagine we're a cow getting into, lying down, standing up and leaving a stall. So what does the cow need to perform those movements? And so we put together this little flow chart.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that you got up on tables in the classroom and
I know you want me to do
demonstrated.
that, but I just think people aren't ready for that. Not in this episode, anyway.
Right.
And so the flow chart is talking about the surface that the cow is on, the resting space, the lunge space, and the bob space. So that's the topic of today. And room below and behind the neck rail, to rise below the neck rail. And we'll talk about that in our next episode. For those able to see our podcast today, we've got a video of a cow getting up on pasture.
Mm-hmm.
And the emphasis here is on trying to provide for the natural rising and lying movements of the cow in our stall design.
But when a cow is rising out on pasture, she is able to move forward.
Yep.
And that is something she can't do inside.
So
in
she
the building.
lunges her head forward and down and then throws it up in the air. And at that time, she throws her front leg forward.
And that gets her out about 1.5 feet, 2 feet forward.
Usually about 2 feet. She ends up standing 2 feet in front of where she was lying down.
But we can't allow her to do that in a freestall facility. So we're going to have to make a slight compromise.
We're going to ask the
cow
cow to make that one compromise.
Yes.
Yep. So how do we go about doing that? Well, the dimensions we were asking for came from these types of video studies and just watching cows. So
Videos again.
So we're watching a big white cow trying to lie down in a little stall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is when we used to build stalls that are 45 inches wide and put 1,600-pound cows in them, and
Tight
they
spaces.
didn't fit.
I can imagine not.
so there's this poor old cow. She's actually finally laid down, but she's doing a bit of head jousting with the neighboring cow. She's got that cow's foot in her ear.
Not very relaxing.
She doesn't look very relaxed.
Not when you're trying to optimize that 12 hours of rest that
Indeed.
you stressed about before.
I did stress that fairly strongly. So she's standing up again. She's got disrupted, two neighboring cows, legs, heads. There's just not enough space.
Mm-mm.
And so that's what we took to our recommendations of sharing these types of videos with the farms that we worked with, and those farmers going, well, this looks awful. we need to do something about that. So that's what we did. We said bigger cows need bigger stalls, Courtney.
I'm automatically thinking, well, if you have to widen stalls, you're going to lose some stalls in the process.
That's what the biggest concern is, and I would always tell the farmer, they're not using them anyway.
Okay.
So those little ones that, they're worried, oh my goodness me, we'll lose 5 stalls on a platform. Those are the 5 that they weren't using. Better to have bigger usable stalls for fewer cows than...
Better to design the stalls to accommodate the animals that are
so we're
occupying
going to
them.
try to avoid having bits of head, bits of leg, and bits of room and compromising the lying space. So that's where that philosophy started from, our work watching cows, the work of Neil Anderson up in Ontario, also showing us videos of cows being disrupted in their lying and standing sequences, what he'd call the hesitation waltz. Courtney, have you heard that one?
I've never heard that.
Cows
That's how I dance in social dancing.
doing the hesitation waltz, cows kind of standing there, looking around, not getting on with the job of getting up and down. And since the times of making these recommendations, we've got sufficient herds that have done it, and then studies to show that that helps improve lying times, reduce lameness, and generally make things good.
Yeah, so people did listen to you and start to widen the stalls, and research did show that there are longer resting times associated.
It showed that I was
wider.
right.
You don't need that.
Again.
Don't let that go to your
I'm
ego,
right.
Dr. Cook.
The biggest concern at the time was, oh my goodness, if we make the stalls wider, the cows will lie across them and shit everywhere. That we'll have diagonal lying and manure, and the cows will turn round and face the other way. That was a common complaint. So there's a relationship that we've got to understand. There's a relationship within these dimensions. So it isn't just make the stalls wider.
Yeah, you can't just fix one thing without fixing everything else.
Yeah, it's make them longer, it's address the dimensions and location of the brisket locator and the neck rail and all these things. This whole stall functions as a unit. You change one thing, you impact another thing. And so this is where these recommendations came from.
And so our recommendations are based on the average size of the animal occupying the pen.
Exactly. There are other recommendations based on actual measurements of the cow. You can do that. We just found that most people wanted a guide stick based on roughly how big a cow they had.
It's still important to go back and look in the stalls and make sure that cows are lying properly and not impeding on other spaces, but these are used as a guideline, and they can be found on the Dairyland Initiative website as well as in an app.
Yes, we have an app on the iTunes store. We have recommendations in the Dairy Farm Manual, in Midwest Planning Services. We recently used them for the guidelines for Australian barn building. So
They're
it's
out there.
Yeah. Contrary to popular belief, we haven't changed the numbers for about 15 years.
Nope.
So farmers used to say,
pretty gold.
Dr. Cook, you keep changing the numbers.
No.
I did change the numbers early on, but not for a while. So let's get back to this lunge and bob thing. What do we mean by lunge and bob? Well, lunge is the horizontal plane. It's that movement of the head forward as the cow starts to rise. So the space in front. Okay?
Yep.
Got it?
I got it. Now
So
what about this bob?
What's bob? What's bob
Must be
got to do with
vertical?
it? It's the vertical plane, exactly. So as the cow lunges forward, her head goes down. So why do you think it goes down, Courtney?
There's got to be something with weight transfer. I mean, she's a big girl.
She's a big girl. Yeah,
gotta
got
be
a
some
big old udder between her
momentum.
back legs. We've got to get the weight off the rear legs so that she can launch those legs upward. Yeah.
Jeez.
So cows can stand with their heads stuck up in the air. I'll show you a video and they can do it. But it's hard. Yeah, and it makes it more difficult. It means that there's more weight and pressure on the back feet, more risk of slipping, more kicking out bedding into the alleyways. It's just tough.
And that's tougher for a older cow that may be lame.
Incrementally harder for a lame cow, for an older cow. Young fit cows can do all sorts of gymnastic things, but it's the old girls we have to worry about. I feel their pain these days as I get out of bed in the morning. So that's the bob. The head goes down to get the weight transfer. Then it goes up. Okay, so it's a vertical plane movement, and as the head goes up, that's when the front leg comes
Juts
forward.
out.
So that front stride that the cow on pasture made. And we want to try to provide for these natural movements in stall design.
Yeah, so we still want her to outstretch that front leg. It's
Yep.
just instead of going forward, she's going to be using that leg to push back out of
Yep.
the stall.
Exactly. So that's lunge and bob. So there's a relationship. As you make the stall wider, you do run the risk of some diagonal lying and poor hygiene.
If it's a short stall platform.
If you've got no place to lunge. And this is where we were, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we built 8-foot long, 45-inch wide stalls everywhere. That was it.
Sounds like a nightmare.
And they did not fit 1,600-pound mature Holstein cows.
Sure they didn't.
Holstein cows typically are 8 foot as they lie down from their nose to their tail. So if you're on an 8-foot platform, there's no space in front to go. So they had to go to the side, and that leads to the diagonal lying.
I'm sure there were some farmers when you came in, if they had a short stall platform and you said, okay, widen the stalls, they were probably a little unhappy because they would have seen
some
an
of them
increase.
did it because actually, there's less disruption and the cows do rest better.
Okay.
But they do lie diagonally, and there's some manure in the bedding as a result of that. So the best approach is to make them wider and longer. And that's where the 10-foot recommendation comes from. So give the cows the 10 feet that they need to front lunge.
2 extra feet to front lunge.
And what we noticed with that was that the cows actually lie much straighter in the stall, because if they can lunge to the front, they tend to lie in that direction.
Makes sense.
So they make a bigger stall, but the cows lie straight in them. And they don't turn round, and they don't do weird things that everybody's worried about. Unless you're a Jersey.
Unless you're a Jersey, or the freestall loops are a little iffy, which is a whole nother...
Oh, you're getting into another
I know,
episode.
I'm not sorry
there.
I brought that up.
We might have to have 2 or 3 episodes on loops. Anyway, bear with us, people. This is a barn that I'm showing here with an 8-foot cow in an 8-foot stall.
Wow, she's touching the
And
side
shockingly,
wall
her nose is touching the sidewall.
when she's lying down.
So that's a usable stall, provided she can lunge to the side, which
Yes.
she can in this scenario.
Because there's no obstruction to the side.
But that's just not ideal, because again, when you lunge
That's
to
gonna
the
promote
side,
Diagonal line.
dirtier stalls. And it does promote a bit of remodeling.
By the cows.
Yes.
Yes.
Not human remodeling. The cows, given 10 to 15 years, will remove the curtains and the chicken wire and parts of the wall. So they can do a great job of remodeling and giving themselves the space that they deserve. Yeah. So we're not going to do that. We're going to build the stalls against a side wall, 10 feet.
Love it.
How many meters?
3.1 meters.
3.1? I thought it was 3.0. Are you rounding
Depends
up?
on how you round.
Oh, okay.
I like giving cows more space.
I like round numbers, so it's 3 meters for you metric folks and 10 feet for us in the old standard measurements. Yeah. So 120 inches of free space. And you can see that here you have the cow lying down, and then there's those 2 feet in front that she can use to lunge.
And she's lying straight in the stall.
She lies straight in the stall. So our good friend of the show, no longer with us, but Albert Meinholz, went round and said, okay, at the same time that all these older barns need new curtains, I can extend the sidewalls. So he built this framework and extended all these sidewalls. Did hundreds of barns, I think. I mean, lots of barns with these sidewall extensions.
Yeah, these were naturally ventilated barns with like a 3-foot overhang. So there was some space.
Built the box under the overhang, elevated it so that the snow didn't sort of beat it all up in the winter, and it created this lunge space for the cows.
Yeah, so it added another 18 to 24 inches.
Exactly. So when you watch cows now getting up in those stalls, wider stalls, the cows are lying straight, but they use every single inch of that overhang. Now, there's a little bit of a bob obstruction there because that shelf wasn't as low as perhaps we would like to see it. And that just emphasizes that lunge beats bob. Lunge is the most important. It would be nice to provide for both, but giving them lunge space was a game changer.
And these sidewall extensions, they're really good for farms that have the shorter stall platforms built in the 80s and 90s and don't have space to take from the alleys to lengthen the stall by taking away space in the alley. So the extension is really a nice little improvement.
And you modified the curtains and replaced those at the same time. So we moved walls, Courtney. Don't believe farmers when they say we can't move walls. We can move the walls.
Okay, momentous.
This was a nice addition because it actually gave them the bob space as well. So they actually rebuilt the retaining wall and moved the entire wall out. So that one bit more of an expensive option, but a nicer outcome. So then we recently got into a discussion about what to do with the single row platform on the inside of the pen, the one
so
that
not along the sidewall, but
the one that faces the feed alley, basically,
because
or comes
now,
off the feed alley.
Yeah, you have supposedly you would have space in the alley when she's lunging and bobbing.
That's the argument. Okay, let's just give her the 8 feet or 8.5 feet, something like that, and she can lunge into the alleyway, so you don't have to build that platform as long. You can do that, but you can kind of see from this picture that shortened area in front of the brisket where the cows put their stride, their front legs, that becomes pretty narrow. Mm-hmm. A lot of potential for slipping and injury and some issues with that. Oftentimes the leg will sort of hang out into the alleyway itself.
But then if you have sand bedding,
a lot of sand loss out the front.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can see sand getting kicked out into the alley from the front of the stall, not just the rear of the stall. To prevent that, some people will put a retaining wall, a 8-inch lip above the brisket locator to retain the bedding. Well, then, if that's at 8 feet...
Yeah, that obstructs...
It starts to obstruct the bob space.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the issue with these shorter platforms. And, some cows, you'll see them dog sit if we're using mounting brackets for the loops that further compromise that bob space. So dog sitting cows get up on the front first, and so they end up in this sort of awkward position, kind of looking at you weirdly.
I've ever heard you say dog sitting.
Dog sitting,
cows.
Yeah. Yeah. So you'd see that because we've eliminated it, Courtney.
I came around just in time.
Yeah, you used to see there's a lot in the older barns because now we build the platforms 10 feet long. Yeah, so if you build them 10 feet long, you can have your mounting brackets for your loops out of the way. You still have the 2 feet free. You can have a 4 or 8-inch lip on the retaining wall to retain the bedding. You can have all those things. You can even put a gate, a management gate.
If it's a stall near a crossover and you have a gate to
you've usually got to close that gate somewhere, and it'll often compromise the lunge space of that short platform. And
but in a nice long platform, it's out of the way.
And you got, things that hold the roof up.
Oh, important things like
posts.
Beams.
Yeah, and those posts can be located in stalls, and if they're closer to the cow's nose, they start to compromise how those cows are using them. Mm-hmm. This was the most recent one with a 10-foot platform where we didn't even put a retaining lip, because with that 10-foot space, really not a lot.
You're not getting a lot of sand getting out the front. With
a brisket slope in the front, which we'll talk about in the next episode. You don't lose an awful lot of sand anyway. So that's the recommendation.
So 10 for a single stall platform.
Wherever it is.
For a mature Holstein, we are looking at 10 feet, 3.1 meter long.
Yeah.
Sidewall or in the alley.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Got it?
Perfect.
And that's 10 feet to the outside of the retaining wall, because the builder's always going to put 6-inch walls somewhere. They need to be plus 10, not part of the 10.
Got it.
Okay. So this gets back to, again, what goes in front of the stall, what I call the junk in front. So the junk in front can be the brisket locator if that's positioned too high, so it blocks the front movement of the foot. Again, we'll talk about that later. But also any horizontal obstruction. A mounting bar. We used to put a lot of lower mounting bars on these loops right in the bob zone. So these are bob zone violations. And then anything that would prevent the cow lunging her head forward. So we often put a retaining beam or bar, and mounting those can be located correctly and they can be located incorrectly. This one actually isn't too bad.
No, this is okay.
But you see the issue here. Those are the main reasons cows lie diagonally.
So it's not stall width?
It's not stall width. It's obstructions in front of the stall.
Got it.
Okay. So think about Lunge and bob. So you think this one maybe completely natural movement of the head?
No, this looks a little rough
extension. We've got 2 wires going across, and the cows managed to...
Why would somebody put wires there?
You can ask a lot of questions about some of the things we used to do. She's navigated them. She's doing it.
She's using what space she can get.
Incredibly adaptable, but it
looks uncomfortable.
Tough. It looks uncomfortable. And notice what's happened to the lower divider rail.
Oh, that's broken half.
That's broke because, if your cow is having to contort her body, she's going to hit things and break things and bend
Remodel things.
Exactly, remodeling. The reason this cow is lying diagonally in this stall isn't because it's too wide. Mm-hmm. It's because there's a big old bar right in her face.
Is that to deter her from moving forward? Is that trying to help support the divider loops? What's going on?
It's part of the mounting system of the loops, and it's to prevent cows going underneath the neck rails and potentially getting caught underneath. That would be a common issue of these open fronts on a head-to-head platform, is cows going underneath the neck rails.
Got it.
So you can stop that with a big old bar.
Maybe if it's positioned in the
correctly.
Location.
Yeah. This one's right in the cow's face. She's lying there.
So it's not. So she's going to lie diagonally because she cannot lunge
So
forward.
the recommendation would be remove that bar, change the way your loops are mounted, and free up that space. Or this farmer went another way.
What did they do?
So to prevent the diagonal lying, they put another bar running across the divider loop.
Gosh.
To prevent the side lunge. So now you've taken away front lunge
and side.
And side.
How did these cows even lie down?
Well, this is the cleverest cow in the barn, so she's worked it out and said, to hell with that. If you're going to block the front, I'm gonna back in and lunge into the alleyway. So you get cows
Smart
lying
cow.
backwards. Yeah, and they're not the dumb cows, they're the smart ones. Yeah, they've worked it out. Well done. So don't do that. And we do see that a lot. We see farms trying to prevent diagonal lying by blocking the side lunge option. But if you do that in a situation where the front lunge is compromised,
and you're on a short stall platform,
here we've got another lower mounting bar. Cows are still lying diagonally, even though this farm's on 1,000 stalls put a piece of wood to prevent them to try to use that lunge space. But
I also see some modifications to the side lunge as well there.
Exactly. They're trying to stop the side lunge, promote front lunge, but the front lunge is compromised because of those mounting bars and other cows sat in front of the cow herself. A cow that's on too short a platform can be a social obstruction. A timid cow's not going to lunge her head into that dominant cow. So this comes into play on these head-to-head platforms. So I'm not a big proponent of trying to block all of the lunge options for a cow. They're going to need to get up somehow. So better to provide for that front lunge space. And playing our normal cow again and then showing this compromised cow
in a short platform.
In a short platform, getting up with her head stuck up in the air, unable to launch her front leg forward. Mm-hmm. She gets up.
But it's tough to watch.
It's ugly. It's difficult. And we can make it so much easier for these cows. Mm-hmm. So that's the game. So I mentioned those social obstructions on these head-to-head platforms. Yeah. At the same time, we were building 8-foot long stalls that were 45 inches wide. On the head-to-heads, they were 14 and a half, 15 feet.
Jeez. Not 16? What happened?
16 was we dreamt of 16 back, way back. So if the cows are 8 feet long, put them on a 15-foot platform.
There's some overlapping there.
There's a bit of overlapping going on, and that's not even talking about lunge space. Yeah. So already, as the cows are lying down, the heads are overlapping.
And I'm guessing the dominant cows would take up as much space as she'd want compared to the subordinate.
The dominant cow's going to be fine. It's the subordinate cow that ends up lying, again, diagonally across the stall. And you watch these cows, and they just don't even look at the dominant cow. Yeah. They're lying there terrified. So that leads to this diagonal lying positional problem. It gets a little better at 16, but it gets a lot better at 17.
But then, how are you going to mount the divider loops? Isn't that going to be
That's why we're not doing a lot of 18 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, so 17 is 5.2 meters. That's where we kind of stopped for the most part, even though, there's only a foot, 8+8. There's only 1 foot shared. But given the challenges of anchoring the loops and making sure things didn't fall apart, and the functionality of creating these platforms, it seemed to work. And so that's kind of where we headed to. So these are pictures of 15-foot platforms.
A lot of pillow talk.
a lot of head jousting.
Or that too.
A lot of head jousting. So, yeah, really compromising the lunge space. When you build it, it all looks great, but you start to stick cows in it, and the space becomes very busy. And that's the first 17-foot platform we built.
She's a beauty.
Isn't she? You got good airflow. You've got head separation. You're still going to have a little bit of dominant, subordinate stuff going on. You can see this cow's kind of, not looking at this one. But for the most part, that platform works a whole lot better. And again, good airflow as well when we think about heat stress. So you think about, that compromised shorter platform, and then you put a mounting bar for the loops in the bob zone, and then you put a roof support in the middle of the stall. This cow's doing the hesitation waltz, Courtney.
Yeah.
Did you see what she worked out? She worked out that she could put her nose here.
She's a smart gal.
Yeah, she looked, she kind of worked things out, and then she realized she could put her nose into the adjacent stall and get it down at the lowest part of the bob and get that weight transfer she needed. She didn't go into the front of the stall.
And she got in there. She looks a little uncomfortable though. It's tight.
Bit tight. Yeah, and this was
like a twin-size bed when she should be in a queen.
I think these are 14'6" with 1,700 pound cows. It's tough to watch. Here was another one in a different country with
Finland.
This is a Finnish farm using some deep bedded straw and peat moss. So interesting kind of bedding material. But, oh my God, we've got 3 bars going across the front of the head-to-head stall. We've got a bob zone obstruction, we've got an eye level obstruction, and then we've got an upper bar as well that's probably okay.
So what do you do? How do you fix this?
Get rid of them. Think saving the loops and mounting them in a different way.
Got it.
And so this one, they actually had a workshop, and they created these fabrications that bolted into the stall platform. That went down, not across, and it freed up that whole space in front. So if you're going to put something across the front of those head-to-head stalls, a deterrent wire or something like that, to stop cows going through, mount it level with the top of the cow's heads.
So that when she is standing in the stall, she sees that she can't go forward.
Yep.
But when she's lying down, she can't see anything.
She can't see it.
Wide open.
It's wide open.
So she knows she can lunge forward when getting up.
You've got it. So it's a visible obstruction when the cow is standing in the stall, so it stops her going underneath, but it disappears from view when the cow's lying down.
So when we're walking through pens, we're always looking at the cows that are lying down and making sure that deterrent wire or mounting beam is just above the top of her head.
Yep, just level with the pole.
Yep.
This one's just a scraper wire with a PVC pipe over the top of it, so it can be pretty low cost. This was the first single beam mounting system. So this is from our friends at Norbco. The loops were anchored to a standpipe, and that standpipe was bolted to a single beam. So everything's kind of suspended. Great.
And the beam was above the top of the cow's pole, or right
Initially it wasn't.
Oh, it wasn't?
This was designed to put the beam right in the middle of the standpipe. But we said, can you just push it up a little bit? And they modified the neck rail attachment to the loop and made it so. So this one ultimately
game changer.
Was successful. Gets the loop and the metalwork out of the wet bedding, the wet sand that you put in there, so it doesn't rust as much. Everything's suspended off a single beam. I come along and say, I think the stall should be wider or narrower. It's just a matter of loosening bolts.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can loosen a few bolts and make those adjustments.
Very flexible.
Great for remodels. Yeah, so that beam's just attached every 12 feet to roof supports. You can have any stall width you like in between the concrete walkways, the crossovers.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it's superb for remodeling. This was a remodel from 45 to 50 inches wide in a herd with brown Swiss. Not just black and whites, the little gorgeous brown Swiss cows. And you can see we've got an obstruction when the cow is standing in the stall, and when she's lying in the stall, that beam is level with the tops of their heads and it's not in their way.
Perfect.
Even though this head-to-head platform is only 15 feet.
Yeah, it looks a little short.
It looks a little short. So the newer designs, this one is from our friends at Artex, where they went with a double beam and moved one of the beams above the upper rail of the loop, and then the lower rail was level with the tops of the cow's head. So again, as you see this cow lying in the stall, she's got clear lunge space below, but the standing cow sees those beams as an obstruction. So that's how it all works.
So it can be done. There are options available out there where we can allow for forward lunge.
Watch this cow using all that lunge and bob space, not as she's getting up, but as she's lying down.
Yeah.
It cuts both ways. It's not just rising, it's lying as well. And what I noticed about this one was the cow in front, she's just lying there chewing the cud. She just couldn't care less.
Yep.
Because that's a 17-foot platform and there's sufficient space between the cows for it not to be disruptive. So that's the way it kind of works.
It's the way it should be.
And the cow lies pretty straight in the stall. That bedding looks pretty good. So that's the story of Lunge and Bob, Courtney.
I was still waiting for the story about lunch with Bob.
No lunch with Bob today.
Aw, dang it.
Lunch with Nigel. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you. The Dairyland Initiative is supported by industry leaders who are advancing cow comfort worldwide. We would like to say a special thank you to our premier sponsor, Saputo, who is providing the global community with high-quality dairy products made from high-quality milk from healthy and well-cared-for animals. We'd also like to say thank you to our other sponsors, SaveCows.com, Zinpro, GPS Dairy Consulting, 40 Barn, Sure Gain Trow Nutrition, Munters, J&D Manufacturing, VES Artex, Ventec, and Kestrel Instruments. Thanks for tuning in to the Dairyland Initiative podcast. Want more Dairyland Initiative? Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on our socials, and visit our website for all of the latest recommendations in dairy cattle housing and management. See you next time.